Kansas State adds a wide receiver in the portal, and it should be one that makes an immediate impact in 2025.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on in to Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rao, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. Welcome back to my everydayers. Thank you for joining another episode here at Locked On Kansas State. And we got an exciting episode for you today because we have another commit. The transfer portal is still alive. It's still going. And although we thought Kansas State might have been falling asleep at the wheel, number 2 commit finally comes in the portal. And it is a big one, at least in the case of a position group that is much needed for the Wildcats in 2025. We're going to break that down because it's a good one, and I'm really excited for this one. Jaron Tibbs, Kansas State picks up wide receiver Jaron Tibbs from Purdue out of the transfer portal. Right off the bat, when you see what he's got, it's just exciting stuff. Good height, good strength, and should be an exciting piece for Kansas State next season. But first, this one's sponsored by the college football playoffs, because we all know the college football playoffs are here, and we don't want to miss a moment of action with the college football playoffs presented by Allstate. Begins with 4 first-round games beginning on December 20th and the 21st. You can catch them all on ESPN, ABC, TNT, and Max. Jaron Tibbs is going to be a fun wide receiver for Kansas State. I'm really excited for him. A sophomore this past season, and he made a lot of good plays for a very terrible team in Purdue. And even though Purdue is arguably the worst Power 4 school in the country, and I think that's really safe to say, they were terrible. They had a former Texas quarterback, Hudson Card, throwing him passes, but it just overall wasn't a great thing. He still finished the season with 25 receptions, 305 yards, 2 touchdowns, averaging over 12 yards per reception on a team that was certainly struggling. No doubt about that. Coming into Kansas State, if he can bring that same type of energy, and really if he brought that exact same stat line over to Kansas State, he would already automatically be the number 3 receiver on the team if you compared that to 2024 stats. Pretty close actually to Keegan Johnson's stats. I think he was just about 40 yards less than what Keegan Johnson had for the Wildcats in 2024. But 6'3", 214 pounds. And what I like about that right off the bat is seeing that 6'3" status. I think for a very long time, we have had the discussion that Kansas State needs more size when it comes to the wide receiver group. And this answers that question. There is no doubt about that. 6'3", it gives the opportunity. And I think this is something that we might not be paying attention to right now because we're focusing on just who's leaving and not the grand scheme of things. But this height advantage can be very important down the stretch, and the way that this new offense how it's going to be constructed changes how it could be a huge impact moving forward. And the reason I say that is this height advantage, especially in the red zone. Yes, I know that Kansas State likes to throw a lot of touchdowns to tight ends, and I'm sure that's not going to change in 2025. I think there's going to be a lot of action with the tight ends. I wouldn't doubt that the volume to the tight ends even increase because of the question marks surrounding the wide receiver room. But when you have a guy that's 6'3" that can sit on the outside, that can take those fade routes, something that you haven't really had over the past few seasons, makes sure this team is not one-dimensional at the goal line. And what I'm thinking about in this case is you no longer have a DJ Giddens on your team, talking about the running back position. You have a shifty guy like Dylan Edwards as your running back 1 instead of DJ Giddens. So you are going to have to be more than one-dimensional in ways to score touchdowns. And I think this helps you a lot. Who knows? Maybe we'll see him with more than 2 touchdowns like he had in 2024. He wasn't utilized properly at Purdue, but really who was utilized properly with Purdue in 2024? They were a dreadful team. Their only win was against an FCS school, and there was multiple times that they were shut out in just conference play, college football play, anything, you name it. They were really bad. But looking at Jaron Tibbs' game log, I think this is interesting as well. Although the team was not good in 2024, if you look at his game log, he at least had some good play against some Big Ten opponents. Now, in the grand scheme of things, Kansas State, compared to the Big Ten, Big 12, the Big Ten, in the eyes of many, is seen as a downgrade. Not me. I think the Big 12 is one of the best conferences in football and in basketball, but I don't think that's a bias either, regardless. Most of his games, his better games with his yardage, came against Big Ten schools. It wasn't against those Indiana States, although he did have 4 receptions for 30 yards, and one of his touchdowns came against that FCS school. But he had 5 receptions for 46 yards against Nebraska, 4 receptions for 51 yards against Illinois. He had 4 receptions for 56 yards against Northwestern. He had a reception for 28 yards against Ohio State, who we'll see in the college football playoffs this year. And then he finished the year with 4 receptions for 73 yards against Michigan State. All of those teams are top Big Ten schools. And he was showing up at that moment on a terrible Purdue team and still finding a way to get over 300 yards on the season. Hey, that's great. Because if you throw him into Kansas State right now with a more quality, more proven, more consistent, more confident quarterback like Avery Johnson, and you surround him with a strong offensive line, a good defense, a great running game, strong tight ends around, he's not the only weapon out there. He's probably the 4th or 5th option on any given third down passing play. He's going to make some plays. So that's really exciting. And I do think that he was underappreciated and undervalued and underused at Purdue. So I do think that we're going to see those numbers really increase at Kansas State. As of right now, I would call this a Trace Bivey replacement. And I think that's a very safe thing to say, because looking at his stats and how he produced at Purdue and what we were expecting what Trace Bivey could probably be in 2025 based on what we saw, although his numbers closely similar to Keegan Johnson in 2024, I think just looking the way forward, he's a nice Trace Bivey replacement. Someone who can be the wide receiver 3, possibly a wide receiver 2, if everything works out and he shows some great progression heading in to his junior season. I'm excited about this one. I think it's a really good pickup, and there are a lot of other visits on the table for wide receivers. Not sure if he was the first one to commit, so they made sure they just grabbed one. I know he's not going to be the only wide receiver that they get. That's for sure. And we're going to talk about that later on in this show because there's plenty of other visits coming around. Unfortunately, one of the big ones just fell off the board, but we're still going to discuss where Kansas State lies. But overall, Jaron Tibbs coming to Kansas State, the second commit in the transfer portal, the first on the offensive side and the first in the wide receiver room. And that's huge. They absolutely need to address the wide receiver room because with the exception of now Jaron Tibbs, Jace Brown is the only wide receiver in this room that has any type of college experience, college production right now. Now, we are going to see some interesting things in the bowl game. The depth chart just came out for the Rate Bowl, talking about, where we're seeing different players and getting ready. We saw a lot of the seniors, Jaden Jackson, Ty Bowman, and Dante Cephas are still on the depth chart. So obviously they're going to get their time. Jace Brown is obviously on the depth chart. Good to see, by the way, that he's sitting there as number 1. But we're seeing Sterling Lockett, as I mentioned on a past show. I think he has a chance to really prove himself in this bowl game. And Bradley Demps, he's also the freshman out of Jarrell, Texas. He's also going to be on the depth chart. So we can expect those 2 players to try and make a name for themselves heading into 2025. And that's exciting. That is very exciting. We already know what we got from Jace Brown. You obviously still have to feed him because, as I mentioned, once this game is over against Rutgers in Arizona, there's still 2 more days left for somebody to decide if they want to enter the transfer portal. And to be completely honest, I would not be shocked if at least one player decides to do that. We just hope it's not a guy like Jace Brown. There's plenty of other things that are surrounding this roster as they get ready to prepare to move down to 105. Maybe they prepare and get their last looks in the Rate Bowl, and they make some hard decisions and have some tough conversations to let a player make that decision for themselves with 2 days to go. So with that being said, you got to feed Jace Brown. You got to make him completely get rid of that decision, and hopefully it already is, moving forward for 2025, and make sure he's your wide receiver number 1. Jaron Tibbs is going to be an exciting piece. And then you see what you have left for Kansas State moving into next season. And a guy like Sterling Lockett, hopefully he's the next guy. It'd be great. Kansas State fans would absolutely love that, to see another Lockett shine at the wide receiver spot. And then maybe a guy like Bradley Demps. Hopefully that's a guy who can step up, a 6'1", 207 guy. Again, he's freshman out of Jarrell, Texas. But with that being said, what is next? What's next on the radar to round out this wide receiver room? We're going to discuss that next right here on Locked On Kansas State. But first, it's that time of year again. The college football playoffs are back. And with that new expanded 12-team format, it is guaranteed to be bigger and better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the college football playoffs begin December 21st, starting with the college football playoff kickoff show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern. Leading into the first matchup, SMU against Penn State at noon. Clemson Tigers and the Texas Longhorns step up next for a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern, so don't miss a moment of the action. Watch college football playoffs presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. And welcome on back to Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. Please give a like, comment, subscribe. Check us out on the YouTube channel. We're still growing this page, but we're going to be with you every single day, every step of the way for this transfer portal after the bowl game, in the rest of the off season as we get ready for spring ball. And of course, we have you covered for Kansas State basketball as well, regardless of how good or bad it's going, depending on what side you're looking at. And in this case, it's a tale of two cities when it becomes with the men's and the women's team. But we're talking about our new commitment. Jaron Tibbs just coming over from Purdue. He entered the transfer portal this season, and he is going to become a Kansas State Wildcat, first wide receiver off the board in the eyes for Kansas State. First commitment, I should say, for Kansas State. There are plenty of wide receivers that came off the board, and some of them who had offers and visits to Kansas State, unfortunately, going a different way. One of the big ones right off the bat, Aziah Hunter, that we were hoping to get in the portal, decided to commit to Nebraska today, so he is out of the picture. But there are still a few other players in the picture right now, and one who just had a visit just today. We'll get to them in just a minute, but we have some other players that have already had some visits. Isaiah Johnson, Michigan State receiver. We've talked about him in the past. He's still available. Hopefully that can mean good things. There's a guy like Jaquiz Petaway, Oklahoma receiver. Also, could he join Jaden Rowe, the former Oklahoma defensive player? I'm not sure if he's going to play linebacker or defensive back, so I'll just call him a defensive player right now. Will he join his former Sooner buddy and come on over to Kansas State? There are plenty of names still on the list. Just some of the big names are unfortunately no longer there. With that being said, but Emmanuel Henderson from the Alabama Crimson Tide, he entered the portal. He went ahead and stuck a visit to Kansas State today on Thursday. So hopefully that means good things. And look, there's plenty of names when you think about Alabama and wide receivers, and he might not be the number one that you think of. But if you play at a premier school like Alabama, you're gonna be a top player, or at least you're gonna have the opportunity to be a top player. And you're also going to learn a lot of things, being around a lot of NFL talent. And although he didn't have a lot of playing time on the field this season, he could still bring a lot to this squad if he decides to commit to Kansas State. Junior, this past season, 6'1", 187 out of Hartford, Alabama. Just this season, he only had four receptions for 82 yards. But overall, this is a guy that could change the game. And what we're talking about with Kansas State is they need the depth at the wide receiver spot. As of right now, you're heading into 2025 with Jace Brown and Jaron Tibbs at the moment with your wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2. Is that a terrible thing? I think right now it's not the worst thing in the world, because we know that the tight ends are going to be a huge asset for Kansas State in 2025, but you want to add more. There's no doubt about that. And we don't know what we're going to get from the freshman class that we got on National Signing Day, the 25 players that we signed, and a lot of them were wide receivers. A good amount of them were wide receivers. We don't know who's going to step up, and that's just going to be a great thing. That's going to be a blessing when that happens, when we find out what freshmen are going to make a key impact in 2025. But I don't think you can ever fully expect or rely on a player. I think you can't even rely on a player like Lincoln Cure, your top recruit from 2025, to make an immediate impact the next season, because it's just such a wild card. Making that step up from high school to the Power 4 level, that's a very hard transition. So when you're talking about that position, you don't want to focus on that, saying, oh, don't worry, we got these freshmen coming in, we'll be fine. I think you still need to do your due diligence in the transfer portal, and you still need to take care of what needs to be done heading into next season in spring ball. It's almost like playing with house money. It's bonus money when some of those freshmen step up and do better and make immediate impact, something that you weren't expecting so soon. That's great. You want that to happen, but you can't rely on it, right? So we'll see what happens moving forward. But there are multiple players still taking visits to Kansas State. There are multiple players who already have. We're still waiting on some reports in the eyes of the wide receiver room. I would like them to overall bring in 3 wide receivers, but as slow as it's going with Kansas State, and I know we probably shouldn't be too concerned because there are still plenty of time with the portal. There's still multiple days for players to decide if they want to actually enter the portal as well. And then you can have players commit at any time until spring ball. Like that can happen at any time. But if you look at other schools, and for example, let's look at Texas Tech in the Big 12. They arguably have the best recruiting class right now. They have already brought in 14 different players. Kansas State has brought in 2. Kansas State's let 14 players leave into the portal, but only brought in 2. You can't tell me that there aren't more than 2 holes needed on this roster. And I'm sure that they're still digging, they're still working their magic, and they're still hoping for some commitments. And they might not be in charge of that either. It might not be them trying to, only hoping that it's 2 or only hoping that they're in this position as at the moment right now. It could be the fact that the people that they're chasing are trying to play the game of the transfer portal and chasing all these visits and getting a free plane ride and a free hotel and checking out other schools and doing their due diligence to see where they want to spend their next season. It's hard to blame an athlete for doing that in this new landscape of NIL and college football and how the transfer portal works. But if you're trying to prepare yourself, if you are Kansas State and you're trying to prepare yourself for the Rate Bowl that happens next week, and you really only have this upcoming weekend to do in-house visits for the most part with your full coaching staff fully involved in Manhattan, you'd want to think that you'd hope to bring that more names saying that, okay, I'm going to be a Wildcat in 2025. So I'm not going to lie to you and say I'm not concerned, because I would be lying to you. Why would I say that? I do think there's a little bit of concern of why there hasn't been a lot of traffic of saying that I'm going to be with Kansas State in 2025. But when you see all the names of the visits and the offers that Kansas State is putting out there, you got to play the long game. You have to hope that the long game is going to work for a team like Kansas State, a team who had so much momentum after National Signing Day is almost like stopping dead in their tracks with this slowness of the transfer portal. Hopefully it turns around. Hopefully we get like 4 or 5 this weekend. Hopefully on the 20th, on Friday, we hear something about a potential defensive back, a potential safety committing, and hopefully he goes to Kansas State. We'll have that covered here on this channel, on this show, if so. But regardless, hopefully we hear some more names. I would love to hear 3 wide receivers total once this portal is over for Kansas State. And I'd love to hear at least 10 names out of the portal for Kansas State, sounding like it might be more 6 to 8 range based on the type of pace we're at. But I hope that changes this coming weekend. If they commit, regardless, even though this show normally comes out just Monday through Friday, we'll make sure we have a reaction show up here for you, and we'll have it covered as soon as possible, even if it is on Saturday or Sunday. We got plenty to talk about this weekend, as well as both the men's and women are playing their final non-conference game in basketball. So we have so much to cover. But with that being said, let's take one more look at this wide receiver room heading into the Rate Bowl and what to expect, as we are just less than a week away now. Well, actually a week away from the Rate Bowl in Arizona. We'll do that right here as we finish up this show on Locked On Kansas State. But first, get ready to tackle all the college football and NFL action with FanDuel's America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, all in one place. So when you get the hunch in the middle of a game and you check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment count with FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. Today is also sponsored by Prize Picks. Check out Prize Picks. Use the app today. Download the app and use Lockdown College to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Lockdown College when you download the app and get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. I think Prize Picks is pretty cool. You can make your holidays bigger and brighter with Prize Picks, the best place to get real money action while watching your favorite sports. And you can win up to 1,000 times more with your money with Prize Picks. I actually enjoy Prize Picks because I love the opportunity to do more or less. You don't have to worry about the other options that we see from other possible sports books. You can check it out. It's a different aspect on the sports betting side. If you think Patrick Mahomes, who's going to be active this weekend for the game, if you think he's going to be over a certain amount of touchdowns, well, click that more or less button, and you got to use just two different players. How about Travis Kelce? Put him in the mix. Travis Kelce's always a good one. Or maybe Hollywood Brown. Maybe he gets active for the first time on the season. If you think he's going to get some action, hit that more or less button. Check it out. Prize Picks. You can, as I mentioned, you can win 1,000 times more your money with Prize Picks. Join now because this holiday season, Prize Pick is giving away 2 free picks in December, and they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Pickmas. So again, use code LOCKDOWNCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, let's finish up this episode here on Locked On Kansas State. This is an interesting one. And again, I'm really excited about it. And Jaron Tibbs is going to be a Kansas State Wildcat in 2025. I mentioned that he is, in my opinion, he was very underutilized. I think he underperformed because of that. And I think he's going to shine in 2025. Check out his highlights. Just hit a YouTube up, or if you want to even kick it back, I recommend checking out, like if you have ESPN Plus, go to the archives. You can check out some of the past games of the college football season with ESPN Plus. Definitely recommend that if you have an app, or just check out YouTube and find the highlights to maybe the Northwestern game or the Michigan State game. If you want the most recent of him, he performed really well in that Michigan State game, those 4 receptions. And just check out how he does. I think he played really good football. I think my most exciting or my most impressive days from him were watching him, even though they lost. No surprise. Purdue lost every game with the exception of one against Nebraska. He has some really good plays against Nebraska. He grinds. He makes good blocks, by the way, too. PFF grades really like his PFF scores. And it's not just in the receiving aspects as well. It's with the blocking. It's with just multiple things. So really excited to see what we're going to get from Jaron Tibbs. The only downside or the only concern, and this could be for multiple reasons, it could not be just because of him as well, were the fact that he had his reception completion, if you will. There was only 25 receptions for Tibbs in 2024 out of 42 targets. So just under 60% in the reception percentage category for those 305 yards. So that means that he was targeted 42 times, only got 25 of those. So you're saying that 17 of those targets were either drops, were either missed passes, no catches, whatever the case might be. Now, when you're just looking at this data point and the stats the way it is, just seeing targets and the receptions, it doesn't tell you how many are drops, how many are throws that were, 10 feet over his head, how many of those were in that case, right? Targets are a very bland stat where it just says, okay, it was intended for this receiver. Was it intended for the receiver, but did it fall 10 yards short? I mean, that's a whole different concept. But overall, that is one concerning stat line if you don't dig into the rest of his game. If you're just looking at the numbers, which I don't recommend you do, by the way. I recommend you check out and see what he has in store for him, because if you do, I think you'll be more excited like I am right now. But if you do look at just the numbers, that 17 non-receptions, but still targets, could be a concern. Going into that Rate Bowl again, we're going to get more into the Rate Bowl as we start off Monday, as we officially hit bowl week on Monday. As we get there, we're going to talk more about the positions. But while we're here, let's continue to talk about this wide receiver group. Coach Kleiman put out the depth chart. He put out 6 wide receivers on the depth chart. Jace Brown obviously leading the charge, but Jaden Jackson, Ty Bowman, Dante Cephas as those seniors sitting on that depth chart still as well. And then Sterling Lockett and Spradley Demps on that roster. I am really excited to see what Sterling Lockett and Spradley Demps can do. If you want to know about the running back, since we're in that conversation, Dylan Edwards, number one running back. Are you surprised? I don't think you should be, but he's number one running back on that roster as well. That's a good sign because we never truly got the answers of will Jace Brown return to Manhattan in 2025? Will Dylan Edwards return in 2025? Seeing them as running back one and wide receiver one in the depth chart heading into the Rate Bowl, to me, that's a good sign. That means that the coaching staff at least knows what they're seeing, and hopefully it's not just a last hurrah before they put their name in right after the game. Hopefully that doesn't happen. But we're going to cover that and so much more on this show. We have plenty of good things coming for you on Locked On Kansas State, so stick with us. We're going to be covering the men's basketball game this weekend as they finish off their non-conference schedule against Wichita State, heading into the conference play. We still got plenty of portal chatter to talk about, and then we still got to get to the women's game because they deserve all the credit in the world. We got plenty to talk about here on Locked On Kansas State. We're going to have it for you right here. But until then, please like the video. Please subscribe. If you're listening in audio form, please give us a 5-star review because it does help us get more listeners out there, hopefully to more Kansas State fans so they can hear this show and continue to bring it on. So until then, we'll be back here with another episode of Locked On Kansas State. Take care.